I hadn't planned to propose that night. Honestly, I wasn't even sure if I still believed in forever, but standing in front of 97 grieving strangers at Parker's memorial, holding the velvet ring box I'd stuffed into my coat pocket like a coward, I realized I had never wanted anything more in my life than to ask him to be mine. They say grief makes you do strange things, but no one warns you about the quiet madness of nearly proposing to a ghost. My voice cracked mid-sentence when I said his name like it was still raw in my throat, unhealed. Then someone in the back, tall, dressed in black like everyone else, started crying, not sniffles, not polite sobs, full-on uncontrollable weeping. And even before I saw their face, I knew that was no stranger, that was Eli, the person Parker had sworn he hadn't spoken to in years, the one he had called a mistake. The one he had left behind in some tangled chapter of his past he never let me read. I froze, the room spinning like a carousel, the kind that only plays sad music. The applause that followed my eulogy felt like knives. I stepped down from the podium, my legs mechanical, eyes locked with Eli. For a split second, he looked like he might run, eyes wide, cheeks flushed, but then he walked straight up to me and whispered, "You have no idea, do you?" And just like that, the floor beneath the last 3 years of my life gave way. My breath hitched. His hand brushed mine, brief, electric, unbearable. I remember his eyes, though, the color of water just before a storm. "He didn't tell you what happened in Barcelona?" he asked, quiet enough that only I could hear. Barcelona. Parker had said that trip was for work, a boring, forgettable conference, but Eli was shaking. His mouth curled around truths he didn't want to say, like they tasted like poison. "He was going to choose," he added, "between us. That's why he brought the ring, but you weren't supposed to know, not like this. The ring, my ring, or maybe not." Everything tilted. How do you mourn someone you realize you never really knew? How do you breathe when even the air feels like a lie? I walked out into the cold, gasping like I'd forgotten how lungs worked. The city was quiet, too respectful or too indifferent, I couldn't tell. My phone buzzed, one new message, a video from an anonymous number. I opened it. There was Parker, laughing, sitting between Eli and someone else, someone whose face I'd never seen before. He leaned in, whispered something to the camera. I turned up the volume. "When they find this, I'll be long gone," he said. "Tell them I loved them both." The screen went black, and suddenly I wasn't sure which them he meant. I couldn't breathe, my hands shook as I rewatched the video, over and over. Each time the words "I love them both" hit my ears, they sounded more like a warning than a confession. Who was both? Was I one of them? Did Parker think of me that way? A sudden panic set in, the kind that clenched your chest and made your heart pound too fast, like you were drowning in your own confusion. The cold air on my skin did nothing to dull the raw fire inside. I should have felt relief. He was gone. Parker was gone, and there was no more pain, no more worry. But all I felt was betrayal, a gnawing ache that sunk into my bones. I was supposed to be the one. I was supposed to be the person Parker loved. I thought that was the reality we had built. But now, standing on the edge of the world that had crumbled under me, it felt like all that certainty had been built on sand. I pushed my phone into my pocket, refusing to look at it again. But the weight of the secret Eli had just dropped on me, pressed on my chest, suffocating. I didn't know what to think, let alone feel. But my feet carried me through the quiet streets, moving faster as though the physical act could outrun the storm inside. Without realizing it, I found myself at the old cafe Parker and I used to frequent. It was closed, of course. It had been years since we'd stopped coming here. The memories felt as brittle as dry leaves, fragile and ready to crumble. Yet there I was, staring at the faded sign like it held all the answers, as though Parker might walk through that door and explain it all to me. I pushed against the glass, testing if the door was locked, but it wouldn't budge, and that was when I saw him. Eli, he was standing in the alley across the street, leaning against the brick wall with his arms crossed, watching me as if he'd been waiting for me to arrive all along. His eyes, those stormy eyes, never wavered. "Did you get my message?" His voice was low but not unkind. He didn't approach right away, as if giving me space to process or escape. But I couldn't run, not anymore. "Parker," I started, the words thick in my throat. "Why didn't you just tell me? It wasn't supposed to be like this. Our love was supposed to be a simple thing, no secrets, no twists, but it was all falling apart like a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit." Eli stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold air. He didn't answer right away, only ran a hand through his disheveled hair like he wasn't sure where to start either. When he finally spoke, his words were weighted with something I couldn't name. "Because he didn't want you to know what he had with me. He thought it would ruin you, but when I saw you today, I realized something." He hesitated, a flicker of pain flashing across his face. "It wasn't just about me and him. You were his choice too. You were always his choice." I took a step back, unable to comprehend. I wanted to shout, to demand clarity, but my throat had gone dry. The space between us felt too tight, too charged. Eli's gaze locked with mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't finished. I never got the chance to tell you, he continued, his voice cracking just slightly. Parker thought you deserved to live in the dream, the one he made for you. He stopped, swallowed hard, and I saw it, the same hunger for understanding that lived in me in both of us. I'm not sure how to wake you up from it. I stood there, blinking, caught in a tornado of words and half-formed realizations. My heart pounded in my chest, fighting against the silence that stretched between us. I wanted to scream at him to demand answers, but my mind was too tangled in knots to form a coherent thought. The dream, that's what Parker had given me. A carefully constructed world where I was the center, where everything made sense, even though I could feel the edges crumbling sometimes, like I was always one step away from finding the cracks. I had lived in that dream without questioning it because it was all I knew and because I thought we were solid. But now the dream was shattering and I was standing on the edge of reality, staring into the dark abyss of Parker's hidden world. Eli took a step closer and I didn't pull away. His presence was like a magnet, drawing me in despite every instinct that told me to run. His eyes held me captive. There was something raw in them, something fragile and broken that mirrored what I felt. Parker thought you deserved the truth, he said again, quieter this time, like he was trying to untangle his own feelings. But he was wrong. His words landed in my chest like a slow, deliberate punch. He was wrong. In that instant, I realized that the Parker I thought I knew, the one I loved, the one I had built my life around, had always been playing a part. He had never truly trusted me with everything. I wasn't the person he could be honest with, and worse, I wasn't the one he felt he could choose without reservation. I didn't know who I was supposed to be anymore. If Parker had kept something this big from me, how could I have ever known him at all? Eli's voice broke through the haze of my thoughts again. It's not just about the lies, though, he murmured. It's about who we are when the truth comes crashing down. His words were sharp, but they were also tender, like he understood something deep inside me that I hadn't even realized yet. He took another step forward, his hand hovering between us, a silent offering. You're not the only one who loved him, you know, he whispered. But I didn't know how to love him and let him go, not until I saw you, until I saw what he had with you. He couldn't tell you the truth, but I can. I can tell you everything he wanted to say but never could. I wanted to step back to put distance between us, but I couldn't. I couldn't look away from his eyes. They were full of a grief I couldn't deny, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen before. His vulnerability was terrifying, yet somehow it felt like a mirror, reflecting the pieces of myself I had hidden even from me. A quiet longing echoed in my chest, a desire to understand, to know the parts of Parker that had been kept from me, the secret loves, the silent promises. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught, tangled in my throat. Instead, I stepped closer, slowly, cautiously. Eli's eyes widened like he wasn't sure what I was doing, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he held my gaze, waiting, a mixture of hope and fear flickering in his expression. The first touch was electric. Not the kind of spark you feel when you're kissing someone for the first time, all nervous energy and excitement. No, this was different. This was the kind of spark you feel when everything you thought you knew about love, about truth, gets turned upside down and suddenly there's nothing left but a connection that defies everything you thought you wanted. I reached out and touched his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, the softness of his breath. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. It couldn't. And yet, as his lips met mine, a deep, aching tenderness flooded through me, something so raw, so honest, that I felt like I had just woken up from a dream I never wanted to end. The kiss lasted only a moment, but it felt like an eternity. Time slowed, bending in ways I couldn't understand. The world around us faded, and all that existed was the warmth of Eli's lips against mine, the rawness of everything we had just uncovered, and the hollow echo of a love that had been built on so many illusions. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and disoriented, I realized I had no idea what to do next. The kiss hadn't been about fixing anything or solving the mess that was Parker's life or mine. It hadn't been about filling the emptiness his absence had left. It was something else, something I couldn't name, something that made the ground beneath my feet feel both certain and uncertain at the same time. I didn't expect that, I whispered, my voice cracking, not because I was sad, but because everything had shifted so quickly, so radically, that I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Eli didn't respond right away. He just stood there, looking at me with those stormy eyes, as if he too was trying to figure out what had just happened. I didn't either, he finally said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. His thumb traced along my wrist, the touch delicate, like he was afraid that if he moved too quickly, everything would collapse again. But sometimes you have to do things that don't make sense to see what's real, he added. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like maybe I could understand him, maybe I could understand myself. The years of loving Parker, of following a dream I didn't fully comprehend, seemed so distant now, almost irrelevant. Eli wasn't just a fragment of Parker's past. He was here, standing in front of me, making me feel something I hadn't allowed myself to feel: freedom. Freedom from the lies, from the expectations, from the roles we were supposed to play. I had been living in the shadows of someone else's love story, and now I was standing in the light of my own, unsure of what it might look like, but oddly hopeful. "You're still here," I whispered, almost to myself. The words felt foreign, as if I was waking from a dream where everything had been scripted, and now I had to make the next decision on my own. I looked at Eli again, really looked at him, at the way his shoulders were slightly hunched, like he was still carrying the weight of every choice he had made, the secrets he had kept. "I didn't think you'd still be here after everything that happened," I admitted. "After the way Parker left, I thought," but Eli cut me off with a sharp, almost bitter laugh. "I don't think I'm supposed to be here," he said, the words laced with irony. "But maybe that's what makes it real. I don't know what we're supposed to be anymore, but I know I want to find out." He stepped closer again, closing the distance between us until there was barely a breath of air left. "I'm not him," Eli whispered, his forehead resting gently against mine. "I won't promise you anything, but maybe that's where we start." The honesty in his words, so unguarded and untainted by the baggage we both carried, settled between us like a quiet understanding. I didn't know what would come next, or if there even was a next. I didn't know if this was the beginning of something new or if it was just another fleeting moment of connection that would dissolve with time. But what I did know, what I could feel deep within me, was that this kiss, this feeling, this raw, unfiltered connection was something neither of us could deny. It wasn't about what we had lost or what had been hidden. It was about what we could build now from the wreckage of everything that had come before. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of a love that wasn't perfect, but was finally truly ours. The days that followed felt like waking up from a dream I wasn't ready to leave. The world outside continued its relentless march, indifferent to the whirlwind that had spun through my heart. I found myself caught between the past and the present, walking a fine line between what I had known and what I was now discovering. The funeral had ended. The speeches had been made. But something had shifted in me, something irreversible. It wasn't just the kiss. It wasn't just Eli's presence or the secrets Parker had left behind. It was the realization that I had been living in a version of my own life that wasn't entirely mine. I'd been too caught up in the idea of love, of what it was supposed to be, that I had never truly allowed myself to feel it, to experience it without the filter of someone else's expectations. Eli and I spoke less and less about Parker, as if saying his name would unravel everything we had begun to understand about ourselves. We didn't need to talk about the past. What we had, whatever this was enough. We were slowly building something together from scratch. Our conversations were quiet, sometimes awkward, but they were ours. No longer clouded by the weight of unspoken words or unacknowledged truths, we allowed ourselves to exist in the moment, even if we didn't have all the answers. We talked about things that made us laugh, things that made us angry, the small things that used to seem insignificant, and on the rare occasions we touched, it was never rushed. There was something sacred about it, as though we were both unsure of how to move forward, but somehow both unwilling to pull away. But there was one night that felt like it would be the last time I would ever feel like I was in control. We were sitting on the roof of my apartment building, wrapped in blankets as the city stretched out below us, silent except for the hum of the distant cars and the occasional murmur of the wind. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I had been leaning against him, listening to him talk about his childhood, about how different his life had been before Parker, when he turned to me suddenly, his face serious, his eyes unreadable. "Do you ever think about waking up from all of this?" he asked. His voice was low, distant, as if the words were something he hadn't meant to say. Like this is all just a dream and one day we'll have to wake up and face the truth." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if none of this is real? What if we're just two people clinging to the scraps of something that wasn't meant to be?" His voice cracked as he said the words, and I felt a tightness in my chest. The vulnerability in his question hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know how to answer. I had been afraid of this moment, the moment when reality would break through the dream I had been living and I would be forced to confront everything that had led me here. But I didn't want to answer with fear, not now, not when the feeling between us felt so raw and so unbreakable. "I don't want to wake up from this," I said, my voice quieter than I had intended. "Even if it's a dream, even if we don't have all the answers, I don't want to wake up." I looked into his eyes, searching for something, anything, that would tell me I wasn't alone in this. For the briefest moment, Eli's eyes softened and the weight of everything that had been left unsaid seemed to dissolve between us. Then, just as quickly as it had come, that softness faded, replaced with the same uncertainty that had haunted us both since the beginning. But this time, it didn't matter. Because as we sat there, side by side, not speaking, not needing to explain anything, I realized that the dream we had was just as real as anything else. Maybe it wasn't perfect, maybe we didn't have all the answers, but it was ours, raw, flawed, and beautiful in ways we couldn't yet fully understand. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to let it be enough. Because our first kiss had felt like a dream I never wanted to wake from. And for the first time, I realized I didn't have to